1-800. The state GOP is wanting a probe into Congressman Keith Ellison's pilgrimage to Mecca.
Huh?
They want to take a look at exactly who funded it and what happened. Michael Brodkorb is with us, the deputy GOP chair. Michael, good morning. What exactly is the GOP's issue in this trip?
Well, the issue is that Congressman Ellison, a member of Congress, obviously received some type of gift here. This was not a trip that he paid for by himself. A nonprofit group in Minnesota paid for this trip, paid for his trip to Saudi Arabia, to Mecca, and he has failed to disclose the expenses related to that trip. And so in reporting that was done by a news outlet in the Twin Cities, Republican Party of Minnesota weighed in yesterday, and we felt there was an obligation, we believe, for Congressman Ellison to disclose the expenses, to return any state money that was used for this trip. And we also called for the ethics investigation by the House Ethics Committee. The reason for this is simple, is that Congressman Ellison is refusing to disclose or is refusing to release a detailed summary of the expenses. He's also, in essence, refusing to disclose the communiques that he had with the Ethics Committee about how this trip was even approved. Democrats and Republicans have raised concerns about this arrangement, and media outlets in the Twin Cities are starting to ask a lot of questions, and it's time, I believe, for Congressman Ellison to disclose details of this trip, the arrangement, and also if there was state money that was used for this trip, it should be reimbursed.
Was the trip initially reported without the cost of the trip, or was this something that he even tried to hide, even taking the trip?
I'm not aware that at any point that Congressman Ellison has ever disclosed any of the expenses related to this trip. His office had a communique, reportedly had a series of communiques with the Ethics Committee about this trip. Congressman Ellison could release the expenses related to this trip. He could release those communiques with the Ethics Committee as to how this trip was even approved, and he's failed to do so.
But hasn't the congressman said that he will, once if asked for by the Ethics Committee, he says he will release that information?
Well, I think our point yesterday was to nudge that process along and make sure that the Ethics Committee does look into it. But there's nothing. Congressman Ellison wasn't elected to represent the Ethics Committee in Washington. He was elected to represent the state of Minnesota. And people in the state of Minnesota, I believe, have a responsibility, have a right to know who paid for this trip. And rather than waiting for the Ethics Committee to force him to release this information or to dictate that he should, Congressman Ellison should do the Minnesotan thing and to release this from the interest of transparency and good government.
Is it typical, though, that they disclose this type of thing without anything around it? It sounds to me, and just in reading the congressman's office, some of their responses to this, is that they don't mind disclosing this type of thing. It just got to be asked. It was taken for private purposes. Typically, we don't disclose the dollars and cents and who paid for what when it's a private trip. So why should we have to do it now?
Well, if Congressman Ellison is asking for someone to ask, if Congressman Ellison is in essence is wanting someone to ask for this material to be disclosed, I'm asking for it today. Mm-hmm. The state party, made inquiries yesterday to the Ethics Committee about that. There's a variety of people now asking for this information to be released, including news outlets throughout the Twin Cities. An outlet in the Twin Cities just wrote this morning, what's wrong with this picture? Mm-hmm. At first glance, just about everything. This is a very serious arrangement, and Congressman Ellison could clear up all the clouds of doubt and suspicion about this by releasing information and answering some questions, and he's just refusing to do so.
Do you smell something there, Michael, or what got you? Go ahead.
Oh, absolutely. I think that this is not passing the smell test on a variety of levels. And look, it's not just Republicans that are raising concerns about this. It's news outlets and other Democrats. You have to remember that some of Congressman Ellison's colleagues in Washington got to office that way, including Senator Klobuchar and Congressman Tim Walz, by speaking out against exactly these type of arrangements where nonprofit groups are able to pay for trips for members of Congress. And members of his own party have spoken out against this practice, and Congressman Ellison should follow suit. Look, if Congressman Ellison is frustrated with the exposure and the attention given to this subject, he could do the right thing and stop that by releasing communiques that he's had with the Ethics Committee, by releasing information. The other point in this that we need to discuss is that the potential that there was state monies used for this trip. State of Minnesota is facing a pretty serious budget deficit right now. And members of the legislature, there are very tight restrictions on their ability to travel. And if state resources were used to pay for Congressman Ellison to go on a junket to Mecca, that's a very serious problem.
But that's an if, too. And you mentioned frustrated. He doesn't sound to me like he's frustrated. From what I'm reading in the Star Tribune, he says, I don't mind disclosing these details if that's what the Ethics Committee decides. That doesn't sound like frustration. That just sounds like a guy, I agree with you, we should know exactly what it is. I almost feel, though, like we're being a little bit impatient with this.
I think that I read his a letter to the editor that he wrote today. Mike, what I have sensed is I'm going to characterize him as frustrated and defensive about this trip. This call for an investigation and an inquiry could end today if Congressman Ellison and his staff released the documentation on this trip, disclosed the expenses, and lived up to the standard that other members of his party have put forward for how they're going to conduct themselves. Congressman Ellison isn't passing that smell test on transparency. This is a loophole that arguably exists within the law, and I think the potential here that state resources, at a time when there's a budget deficit going on, when police officers and law enforcement officials across the state are taking pay cuts, while teachers are losing their jobs, there's a potential that state resources were used to pay for Congressman Ellison to go to Mecca, I think is a very, very serious problem.
Are there pictures of him at Mecca, or is there a chance we might find out he's hanging out in Argentina?
I don't have any information on it. By all interest's sake, this is what he has disclosed on official forms, that this is where the trip that he took. And we're certainly respectful of Congressman Ellison taking that trip, but at the end of the day, if this was not for his official capacity as a member of Congress, this was paid by an outside group. The average citizen does not have the type of benefits that they get trips paid to travel halfway across the world. This was a benefit that Congressman Ellison had, and the taxpayers who put him in that position, and the voters of Minnesota who put him in that position in the House of Representatives in the United States Congress, have a right to view the disclosure about that trip, and he is simply refusing to do that. It's really kind of, as outlets in the Twin Cities have said, it's really kind of mind-boggling, and he is failing an ethics test here.
All right, Michael Brodkorb, thank you very much. We appreciate it, all right?
Thank you so much.
Talk to you later. Deputy GOP Chairman Michael Brodkorb on that.